Hello students, I am Suvarna Paranjape from Deccan Education Society's D.E.S. Secondary School. Today we are going to study chapter number 2, Location and Extent from your geography textbook. This year's geography textbook deals with comparative studies of two countries. Now, to understand this better, we shall see the presentation of this lesson. Well, children, to study geography of any region, we need to develop certain skills like observation, classification, comparison, reading of the graph and the maps and the diagrams is very essential to understand any region clearly. Then to analyze, evaluate what we have studied, or from the observation, we can evaluate certain elements of certain region. We can come down to the conclusion and then a critical thinking. So all these skills we have been studying in earlier years. Now to acquire such skills, we need to study regions using geographical concepts and processes that we have learned in past years. So with reference to two countries, we can learn application of geographical knowledge. But before starting with the lesson, let us collect our previous knowledge of our globe. Here we see the picture of a globe which is having an equator at the center of it, dividing the whole of the earth into two halves, the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. These lines which we see over here are called as parallel of latitudes. Overall, these latitudes are 90 in the southern hemisphere and 90 in the northern hemisphere. Further, the two hemispheres are having an imaginary line called as Tropic of Cancer in the northern hemisphere, which is at 23 degrees and a half, and in the southern hemisphere we have Tropic of Capricorn at 23 and a half degrees. So these two are the most important imaginary lines to study the globe. The equator, the Tropic of Cancer, and the Tropic of Capricorn. Similarly, the whole of the earth is again divided vertically. That is, by the meridians of longitudes. These are called meridian of longitudes. The red color which is shown over here is taken as 0 degrees, which passes through Greenwich in London. Now just behind this is 180 degrees longitude. Overall, this longitude, that is at 0 degrees, the prime meridian, divides the whole of the earth vertically in two halves or two hemispheres called as eastern and the western hemisphere. Now this is called as the two hemispheres of the earth, the eastern hemisphere and the western hemisphere, right? Overall, there are 180 degrees of meridians of longitudes in one half of the earth and 180 degrees on the eastern half of the earth. So this we have studied earlier. It is just to recollect the previous knowledge of our globe. Now, what is the importance of these lines? Now, these specific lines help us to locate certain regions very easily. So this is also called as the grid. Now, let's move on to the lesson. Now, to find out the location and extent of any region, this was very important. We are going to talk about two countries. One is Brazil and the other is India. Now, as we know that we have comparative studies of two countries. Now, which two countries? Then obviously, one is of our own country, India, and we are going to compare India with the other country, Brazil. Now, some criteria were decided to choose Brazil. Let's see what are those criteria. First of all, both the countries should be located in different hemispheres and continents. It should have a coastline like India, and they both should have cultural and natural diversity the same. The country should have a democratic form of government like India, and historical background should be similar. We know Brazil and India were ruled by the European countries. So here we see Brazil is located in a different continent in South America, whereas India is located in Asia. So this is what we have seen where they locate. Now let's see the proper location of these two countries. Let's talk about Brazil. Brazil is located to the left of the prime meridian. That means it is in the western hemisphere, right? Secondly, the equator passes through the northern part of Brazil, and Tropic of Capricorn also passes in the southern portion of Brazil. So these two imaginary lines passes through Brazil, and Brazil is also located in the northeastern part of South America. It also has a wonderful coastline. Now, that means Brazil is located in the western hemisphere, right? In the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere. Now let's talk about India. Now India is also located just above the equator, but Tropic of Cancer passes through India right in the middle of it. So we find India is located in the northern hemisphere. Plus, it is located on the right-hand side of the prime meridian. That means it is present in the eastern hemisphere also. India lies to the southernmost part of the Asian continent. So this was location of Brazil and India. So we find that Brazil is located in different hemisphere and in different continent, compared to India is also located in different hemisphere and different continent. Both the countries are having equal coastline. So this was the location of two countries. Let's move on and talk about the flags of both the country. Here we see the Brazilian flag having green color with a yellow color diamond shape with a spherical disc in the center. So what does these three colors represent? Let's see. The green color is a symbol of the forest. As we know, Brazil has a huge Amazon forest as it lies in the equatorial region. So the green color represents the forest. The yellow represents the gold. The flag of Brazil contains 27 stars over here in this blue disk. Now these 27 stars represents the Brazilian states and the federal district. Now this blue color disk shows the starry night in Brazil, and we find a curved band inscribed with the national motto of the country, written as Ordem e Progresso. It is a Portugal language, which means order and progress. So this is a description of the Brazilian flag. Now let's see what does India flag signifies. The India flag is also called as a tricolor. The national flag of India, the top band is of saffron color, indicating the strength and courage of the country. The white band indicates peace and truth with a dharma chakra. Now this blue color dharma chakra is also called as Samay chakra. The dharma chakra has 24 spokes, which represents 24 rishis. It is also called as Samay chakra, means it represents 24 hours. The importance of the chakra shown over here is that it indicates that there is life in movement and death in stagnation. This flag was adopted on 22nd July 1947, whereas the Brazilian flag was adopted on 19th November 1889. So this was the importance of the flags. Now let's see the important special identities of both the countries. Let's talk about Brazil first. Here you see certain pictures of coffee, a dance form, and a team. Seeing these pictures, we know that Brazil is sixth most populous country in the world and area-wise fifth. It is also famous for its coffee. So it is also known as coffee pot of the world. This country is also famous for its samba dance. You must have seen the pictures in the carnivals which take place every year. This country is also known for its football. So these are the special identities of Brazil. Let's move on to see what India is known for. Now, India is also second largest populated country in the world, and area-wise, it is seventh large. India is also famous for spices. As we know, India grows different varieties of spices in its country. And India is also very popular to be known for its cricket as its popular sport. The picture shows over here the spices and the team of cricketers, which is very important to be known for this country. Now, let's move on to understand the extent of both the countries. Let's see the extent of Brazil. Here it is, we have already seen, it lies in the northern hemisphere and in the southern hemisphere and in the western hemisphere. So, the extent of Brazil lies between 5 degrees to 16 minutes north and 33 degrees 45 minutes south. Here we find the Tropic of Capricorn passing in the southern portion of Brazil, whereas the equator is seen in the northern portion of Brazil. So maximum part of it lies in the torrid zone. So this is the torrid zone between the equator and the Tropic of Capricorn. Then it again lies in the western hemisphere, that is between 34 degrees 47 minutes west to 73 degrees 58 minutes west. So this was extent of Brazil. Now let's see which are the countries neighboring this country. In the north, we find French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela, and Colombia. These are the countries which share their boundaries with Brazil. To the west, we see Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina sharing their boundaries with Brazil. These countries lie to the west of Brazil. To the south, we find Uruguay sharing its boundaries with Brazil. And to the east, we see the whole of Brazil surrounded by the Atlantic Ocean. It is having quite a huge coastal line. In the north, we find the North Atlantic Ocean. In the south, we find South Atlantic Ocean. So this is what we studied about the Brazil extent. Now let's move on to know in detail what we studied about Brazil. Now, some part of Brazil lies in the northern hemisphere, while most of it lies in southern hemisphere. It also lies in the western hemisphere. It lies in the northern part of South American continent. Brazil was under Portuguese rule for more than 300 years and gained independence in 1822. It was under military government from 1930 to 1985. The capital of Brazil is Brasilia, and it has 26 states. Brazil's currency is real. Now, we had just seen with the help of the map the neighboring countries and the oceans surrounding this country. Let's revise. In the east, we find it is surrounded by Atlantic Ocean. In the north, we find it is being shared by the French Guiana, Suriname, Guyana, Venezuela, and Colombia. These are the countries which are neighboring Brazil in the north, whereas in the north it is also surrounded by North Atlantic Ocean. To the west, we find Peru, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Argentina. These are the countries which are neighboring at the western direction of Brazil. To the west, there is no oceans. To the south, we find Uruguay and the South Atlantic Ocean. Now let's study the extent of India. We know India's capital is New Delhi, which is shown on this map over here. Well, we have studied in the earlier map that India lies in the northern hemisphere and in the eastern hemisphere. Let's see its location. 8 degrees 4 minutes to the south, that is, the southern tip of India lies at 8 degrees 4 minutes north. That means it's just above the equator. And 37 degrees 6 minutes to north. This is the extent of India. Then it lies between 68 degrees 7 minutes east and 97 degrees 25 minutes east. Why? Because it lies in the eastern hemisphere too. The Tropic of Cancer passes right in the middle of the country. It divides the country into two halves, the northern India and the southern India. Now, because the Tropic of Cancer passes through the middle of India, half part of it lies in the temperate zone and the southern part lies in the torrid zone. Now let's see which are the countries neighboring India. To the west we find Pakistan. To the northwest we find Afghanistan. Some part of it is sharing with it. To the north we find China, Nepal and Bhutan. And to the east we find Myanmar and Bangladesh. So these are the countries which share their boundaries with India in the north, in the west and in the east. To the south we find Sri Lankan island, but it does not share its boundary with India. So we have seen that India too has a very huge coastline. To the west it is having Arabian Sea. To the south it is Indian Ocean. And to the eastern boundaries of India is Bay of Bengal. So we find these oceans and seas surrounding the whole of India in its southern portion and the countries in the north, east and west. Now let's just revise about India. India is located in the northern and eastern hemisphere of the earth. It's located in the southern part of Asian continent. Now Indira Point in the Nicobar district of Andaman and Nicobar Island is the southernmost point of India and is located on 6 degrees 45 minutes north parallel. Now let's see where is Indira Point. Indira Point is located over here, which is the southernmost tip of India. And the southernmost tip of India's mainland India is Kanyakumari, which we find it over here. Kanyakumari is the southernmost tip of mainland India located in Tamil Nadu. India was under British rule for 1.5 centuries and gained independence in the year 1947. New Delhi is the capital city of India and has 28 states and 8 union territories. India's currency is rupee. So this was explanation of India. Now let's just revise which are the neighboring countries and oceans surrounding India. To the east we find Bangladesh and Myanmar. Then Bay of Bengal is to the eastern border of India. To the north we find the countries Nepal, Bhutan and China. And to the west we find Pakistan sharing its boundary with India. And to the west of southern part of India lies the Arabian Sea. To the south we find the island of Sri Lanka, and the border of India is surrounded by Indian Ocean. So this is the only ocean named after India. Now let's study the historical background of Brazil. As we know, the comparison between two countries has certain criteria. One of it was that both the countries were governed by the European countries. So Brazil was under Portuguese rule for more than 300 centuries and gained independence in 1822. Half a century of it was under a populist military government. Brazil is seen as a contributor to economic growth of the world and an important market in the future. India background is that India was also ruled but by the British for almost 1.5 century. India got its independence in the year 1947. India faced several problems like three wars, famine in many parts before independence. India is a major developing country in the world. India is considered to be a global market. The proportion of youth in India's population is very high. This forms a major part of working population. India is also looked upon as a young country as its youth population is very high. With this, we come to the end of the chapter 2 of location and extent. Thank you. Children, with this chapter, we have understood the location and extent of these two countries. Based on this, the further lessons like the natural vegetations, the physiographic geography of both the countries, the climatic conditions, and the population are all based on this lesson. I hope it was very easy to understand. Thank you.